Greetings and a very warm welcome to our insightful panel discussion on building a resilient workforce, HR's role in tackling VUCA challenges. I am Priyanka from SharePro and I am super excited to introduce our esteemed panelists who will be sharing their valuable insights and expertise with us today. I'm delighted to welcome our first panelist, Nidhi Sharma. Director of HR at Dentsu. Nidhi is also an acclaimed speaker and a career coach who loves mentoring young minds. Welcome, Nidhi. Our
Thank
next
you.
speaker is Ravish Saily, a progressive HR leader heading Syngenta's Global Delivery Center. With 18 years of rich experience, he is known for his disruptive thinking and empathetic mentoring. Welcome, Ravish.
Thank you, Priyanka.
Our lineup continues with Carmistha Mitra, an inspirational leader in the field of HR with 27 years of global experience. She is also a certified life coach, TEDx speaker, and an author. Guiding our conversation today is our esteemed moderator, Rohan Lele, Chief People Officer at HLEGlascoat and Yash Group, with 18 years of diverse experience in HR domain. Beyond his professional expertise, he even owns a YouTube channel and is a splendid singer. And who knows, at the end of the session, we might be treated with a beautiful song. Over to you, sir.
So thanks, Priyanka, and wonderful to have all three of you here. I think so glad to be moderating this session. Thanks to SharePro for this opportunity. And so good to have all three of you, Ravish, Nidhi, and Carmistha, here for this session. So just to set a context of why we are here, and today's topic is about building a resilient workforce. We're going to focus upon the role of HR in tackling the VUCA challenges. Right now, for those who do not know what this term VUCA means, the V in VUCA stands for volatility, the U stands for uncertainty, the C stands for complexity, and A stands for ambiguity. So how do you build a resilient workforce in today's VUCA world is the topic of the day. And I have three wonderful, distinguished, and very experienced HR folks with me, to whom I'm going to ask a few questions around today's topic as a moderator, and also learn so much in this session through their wisdom, their insights, and their experiences. So let me straight away get on to asking questions. And I'm going to start with the first question. And this question is to Nidhi. Nidhi, my question is, during a crisis or an uncertainty, where should HR focus its energy? Is it on fostering stability or driving a disruptive change? What do you think?
Okay, thanks, Rohan. Interesting question, and so much, relevant to the current times that we have. So I basically come in from the IT industry, wherein it's almost 20 years that I am working in this industry as an HR professional. For HR, I think there are various different times which comes in, and with and for us, I think we see the journey of every employee, every individual, with our kind of experiences when they are, just coming out of the campuses, and then, they are becoming those tenured people in the organization, getting into their mid experiences of 8 years, 10 years, becoming a senior professional of 20 years, 25 years, and so on and so forth. We see that journey. The second phase that I think we have seen, at least I have seen, is looking at the economic conditions, how the industry, in what way the industry has been, going or shaping through. There have been times that there was a great demand, but the supply was less. There is a time where there is the demand is less and the supply is too high. So, and at the same time, we really do not know. And today, the economists who are sitting in there in the markets, the financial markets, they're really not sure of how the upcoming year, or even for the year, for that matter, the year 2024 is going to be. Everybody is like, are we sitting on that risky platform? How do you deal with all of that? On a safer side, for some organization, they have literally freezed their hirings. There are organizations who are really, going really, when they're budgeting the 2024, they're budgeting 2024 with a really very, very low risk. Let it be your performance appraisals or anything. So companies are really taking low risks, all of them there. Now, in this time, HR has to play a great role in there. One is, your workforce comes back to you and looks up to you as an HR, as to tell me, what is it that's going to happen? Can you please tell us? Can you suggest us, advise us? How do we take up this entire situation as? So, one, you have to act that person who is not just, thinking from an organization's point of view, but then you're also thinking from the people perspective. How are you guiding those people in today's world? Are you telling them that, okay, if you have a stable job, can you please just not take any risks at this point in time and be where you are? That's stability, right? You have to tell them, just be stable. If you have a stable job, if you have no risk job, just don't disrupt that. Be there. Second is, are you really telling them that, okay, are you trying to tell them that, okay, today we are in a situation wherein, your business is demanding this, but then tomorrow, as we get into the next year or into a new phase of the economy, there may be times when you will have the demand of the market will be something else. Your organization will demand some different skills from you. So today, as an HR, I will want to tell you that, okay, I want to give you that platform that just reskill yourself, upskill yourself, or get prepared for the change that will come in. And when that change comes in, we don't want to get you impacted negatively in this situation, but then how to deal with that situation and start preparing for it from now onwards. And there's no harm doing that. So I think that's where HR has to play a role of a mentor, a change manager, a person who is just preparing, a fraternity which is preparing people and the organization for the change. So that's my take on it. While stability is important, but then how do you ensure, and you have to actually identify, where people need to get stabilized, and which set of people you really need to tell them, there might not be stability here, but then just get yourself prepared. There may be something else that might be coming for you tomorrow.
Yeah, I agree. I think well said, Nidhi. I think it's the key message that I'm drawing home from what you said is, I think it's important to have a balance in terms of fostering stability and also handling the disruptive change. And I'm also reminded of a quote by Mirza Ghalib. Obviously, that quote was in Urdu, but then there's an English translation to it, which says, it's easy to be human, but difficult to be humane. इंसान होना आसान है, इंसानियत is something which is difficult, right? So I think empathy you spoke about, हम जो इंसानियत की बात करते हैं, I think especially when the world is going through so much of disruption all around, it's important to sort of retain that human element. So well said, Nidhi, and thanks for that. So here's moving to my next question, and this is to you, Ravish. And this is about, we've been talking about DEI. There's a lot of buzz around this, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, do you think DEI as a strategy can be helpful in building a resilient workforce and effectively tackling the VUCA challenges? So, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks, Rohan. We've all heard about the importance of diversity. There has been a lot of research which says it has an impact on business. But if we deep dive it a little and understand the core of it, why diversity is so important, in 1980s there was the psychologist came up with a big five theory of our personality, and they said each of us have a personality which has five facets to it. And personality is formed up basis our experiences, where we grew up, parenting, and all of that, lot of that. And because each of us had a different experience, our personalities are different. So whatever scores we have on different facets of our personality, it will have a associated strength and associated risk to that. To understand this better, let me take an example. So say, for example, control is one of the facets of our personality. Person with high control will be very structured. They will plan well, organized. So those are the strengths they will bring in. But the risk with these sets of people will be they will focus a lot on means and not the ends. They'll be always process focused. They will not be able to innovate. Right? People with low scores on control, they will be the people who are uh, blue ocean thinkers, innovative, coming up with new ideas. But the risk with low score control will be these people are not able to implement, they are not able to organize themselves well. In an organization setup, we need both these sets of people. That's why diversity is important. If you just imagine, if you have all the people who are just innovating, thinking big, and no one to implement it, organization will fail big time. And similarly, if everyone is just process focused, then who will innovate during the difficult times? Um, in my past experience, when I was working with one of the banking organization, multinational banking organization, that bank went through a very difficult time after the financial crisis in 2008, to the extent that the government had to pump in billions of dollars to keep the bank running. Um, Post that, they hired a CEO, and the mandate given to CEO was you have to close the bad bank. By bad bank, they meant business which was not making profit or which was not core to the bank, and also to settle all the litigation. There were a lot of legal cases which were going on. And this leader, along with his leadership team, was maybe able to bring in one of the biggest turnarounds in the history of financial sector, and was able to make the bank profitable. And just imagine what happened after that. After that, the CEO was changed, a new CEO was brought in, and the board said, this is a new phase. We want to grow aggressively, we want to grow fast, and we need a different kind of a leader. So the point I'm trying to make is each one brings in a different set of skills, and we need diversity. That's why if everyone is thinking the same way, then very soon we will end up in a situation where kind of there's no maker and checker kind of a scenario. At Syngenta, what we do is we focus on diversity related to gender, people with disability. We hire people from financially disadvantaged background. We go to different regions in the campus to hire from different, say, Northeast, Kashmir, and all of that. We focus on people on break. We focus on ex-defense. So we have seen that through data, a diverse workforce give us higher engagement scores. The retention scores are better, and obviously because they come from diverse background, the thought process is also diverse, Rohan. So I think it's paramount that in VUCA world, diversity, equity, and inclusion is should be one of the prime focus for the organization.
Fantastic, fantastic, Ravish. I think very, very pleased to hear this. That unfortunately, in the Indian context, we still do not really understand. Or we only talk when we talk about diversity, we always associate it with gender diversity. But I'm very glad, very pleased that you brought this point up that it is beyond just gender diversity. It is diversity of thoughts, diversity in many, many different ways. Demographic diversity, not just gender diversity. And more the merrier. I think that's the whole message that I'm seeking from what you just said. So yes, I think very well brought out, and thanks for sharing about what you guys are doing in Syngenta. And I would completely agree that it's just not the diversity that's important. While largely in India the focus has always been around gender diversity, there's a lot that we still need to do as a society, as a community, and as corporates when it comes to equity and inclusion. We have probably not reached there, overall, except barring a few very, very progressive global organizations. So, fantastic. Uh, Moving to my next question, and which is to Sharmishta, and this is, which, according to you, are the top three areas that HR must focus on that will enable building a resilient workforce, thereby, we'll be able to tackle these challenges of VUCA effectively. Over to you.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, of course, Rohan. And I wish I had, one single answer for the same. I don't even know if HR can actually enable building a resilient workforce for that matter. But I think HR works a lot through the leaders, right, in the organization. So I think one of the very important tasks that HR possibly has today is is to be able to really help these leaders understand the importance of their own resilience, right? If the leaders themselves are resilient, if they can handle and balance things better, chances are their teams could. And we saw that, even in Axis Bank, what we ended up seeing, we did a study where we did assessment of the frontline supervisors in terms of their behaviors, their productivity of their teams, and also the attrition, that they were facing. Because, in banking, attrition also is a problem that we're all tackling. So what we realized is there are actually about 11% leaders who are managing it very well in the same ecosystem, and the performance of their teams are superlative, right? Their own behaviors and the way they kind of manage their productivity. So attrition is down and retention is high. In the same ecosystem, there are a certain set of leaders, a sizable number, who are really struggling with the same. So then what we try to do is to look at the entire hierarchy. And what we realized is in the entire hierarchy, there is a certain behavior which is there in the +1 of the supervisors and the +2, where we feel that if we bring in certain agility without putting in the right systems and process, and very importantly, conversations in place, you are building a very anxious kind of a workforce. So the resilience, if we have to really drive HR resilience, we have to see right from the top across levels how resilient are the leaders themselves. Now, resilient doesn't mean I'm like stoic and all, but are you being able to bring in a balance in your own behaviors, the productivity that you're driving, as well as your people, are they succeeding, staying, performing? So study this. It requires a little bit of hard work, My challenge is most of the time HR is a little bit of lip service, giving gyan to everyone. And when it comes to really implementing initiatives, making things happen, bring it back to the board, get attention of everyone, drive the change, it's a lot of work. So I would say, it's time for HR to step up, take actions, bring in some of these best practices, see the data, converse around the data, understand the data, and then work with the leaders to make them productive, efficient, effective, caring for the people, and so on and so forth. If you really want to build a resilient organization, a lot of work to be done, and people do respond if you do. Yeah.
Super, super. I think I'm glad that you've been very, very candid in putting out your thoughts across. So a lot of work and less of gyan is going to make you a good boy. But that's important. And I think you brought this out really well, this whole point that The role of HR is to enable leaders, is to facilitate leaders and help them become better so that they are able to better manage their teams. And there's this whole famous quote from Mr. Murthy from the Infosys who said that people do not leave organizations, they leave their bosses. And which is true uh, to a certain extent, that leaders have a huge impact, both positive and otherwise, depending on how they are able to effectively manage their teams. So great thought, and thank you for bringing that out.
Yeah.
So let
And
me once
I'm just
again,
hastening to add one more point, Rohan, here. Another
yes,
thing that
please go
I've
ahead.
heard, yeah, another thing that I think HR can really do, I've heard it, from people who are wanting to leave, they'll call you and then they will tell you that, I'm wanting to leave because my boss, of course, is not being able to manage. Unke hierarchy maybe,
Mm.
no one's listening. I tried to talk to our HR. HR is saying I'm helpless. I can do nothing. Now, resilience and helplessness together will also not work, right? So I can understand sometimes the leaders, you have to keep them on your side, but how do you influence better in these difficult situations and scenarios and be resilient ourselves as HR professionals? I think that's also important for us to be able to make that
Fantastic
difference.
point. I think I was once talking to a very senior HR professional, and he said that, Rohan, while everybody in the organization talks about business, everybody in the organization talks about production, everybody in the organization talks about strategy. If HR will not take a stand for people, who will? While there is a whole buzz around HR learning more about business and being a business partner, and all of that is true, but if HR will not stand for people in the organization, who will stand?
I agree.
And when we do not stand for people issues or people problem, or when we do not take a stand, uh, we tend to lose our credibility. It's
Yeah. And when
important,
we
and as
do,
you rightly said,
yeah,
it's not just about taking a stand, but positively influencing your leaders
yeah.
on how those changes can happen. Yes, Sharmish, was saying something.
No, I agree with you. And I think when you do that, like you said, Rohan, then you do enhance your own credibility as well. Yeah. As an
Fantastic.
agent.
So thanks. Let me go back to Nidhi again with one more question this time. So tell us about one or two disruptions that you see happening in the field of human resources, and how will it shape the future of the workforce?
So, there are really great thoughts that came out from Sharmishta, talking about the data. She said, rightly, start reading the data, focus on the data. The data talks volumes, and I think all of these surveys, and I'm sure, each one of us in our own organizations, we are doing a lot of surveys. There's a lot of sentiments that come out from people. People have their positive sentiments, negative sentiments. There are things that people tell you, because when you're running these surveys, if they're anonymous, people feel that they can really tell what they're thinking, what they're feeling. They really talk about it. But then how are you using that data? So for HR, I think that one disruption that I today see is technology. HR earlier used to be, driven by Excel sheets. I'm not saying that surveys never happened earlier. Yes, they used to happen. There was a lot of initiatives that organizations were driving, for their workforce based on the data outcomes and everything. But then today, I think technology has taken up that seat, moving away from your traditional styles of working, trying to understand people's sentiments, converting those sentiments into literal actions and initiatives that we do. They are all data and tech driven today. So that's one disruption that I'm really seeing in. And with technologies like ChatGPT, or when you have, those technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning, there are those platforms which are today available for the HRs to really work smart with the data that you are receiving. For an example, I know, and I think I have used in the last few years. I'm becoming a fan of those kind of platforms wherein when you run these surveys are run in a chatbot style, that they're happening and people feel they're literally talking to some human, right? And when you do that, you try talking about everything, and these platforms are actually available synced up to your internal chat platforms that you have in the organization. So which means you have these platforms available for your people 24 by 7. And if I, as an employee, I'm feeling today, right, I'm a little frustrated with something really went wrong, I'll really go back there on the chat bot, and I'll be talking to it, and I'll be putting in my sentiments. All of that comes to me. And then me as an HR, I should be able to read that through. I should be able to use those platforms, that technology platforms. So I'm saying this today, HR needs to be more technology driven. So we are working more in a more smarter way, in a more speedy way, taking actions as and when it's needed, and being very transparent to people, telling that, hey, look, this is what the feedback, that this is what the suggestions and feedbacks and sentiments that I received. And this is how it converted, and this is what I worked on. So that's one disruption that I'm really seeing. And second is, when we talk of partnership, business partners, we are talking about strategic, HRs, we talk about it. But then I think, how many of us as HRs are we getting into those shoes of business as well? First, for us, I think more, before becoming an HR, we need to understand the business side of things first, so that you are kind of trying to work with your business, you're trying to work with your business leaders in the way an organization has to think, in the way the business has to think. And at the same time, because you are that human resource, you're an HR professional, and your job is to look at people, to manage the talent in the organization. So that's where I think that piece of human resource or HR professionals have to change in a little. We have to be, while we are people, HR, but then at the same time we have to be a business HR also, so that we are balancing both the things together. And when we understand business needs more, I think we will be able to create a workforce which is more aligned to business goals, which is more aligned to what a business is feeling, organization is feeling, and at the same time they're trying to, as I said earlier also, upskill and reskill yourself. When will you do that? When you yourself understand that you know what your business need is. Tomorrow this may happen in the industry, is behaving like this on technology, on skills, and this can be the trending industry coming in, or this can be a trend that I see the next 3 years, 2 years. So let me create, move my workforce into that direction. Let me tell people this is what business is heading towards. Let's, work on things like that. So these are, I think, few things that I think we should.
Fantastic. I think very well said. And let me just summarize that very quickly. I think the first point that you said was around technology and artificial intelligence. And I can't agree more on this, that data is the new oil, right? Our decisions today when it comes to people, when it comes to human resources, are far more data driven than it was before, and you rightly said it's not just about getting that data, but also how you use that data for the benefit of your people and for the larger benefit of the organization. So well said. I think technology is playing a very, very important role. And what artificial intelligence has done is, today, there were days when we would have those annual surveys, or some organizations would go for a biannual survey. Today, I can know the mood of my people in the organization today on a real-time basis. I think that's fantastic. I exactly know how my people are feeling today. AI even tells you who are the people in the organization who are likely to leave the organization in the next 6 months. So there is a predictive analytics which is in place. And this is the biggest boon. It's up to us as HR people that we really, really use it to our advantage. Great. And I think the second point that you made was about partnership and going beyond people partnering, understanding the business, going deeper. Because I've always believed this, that when you understand the business, you understand people problems better. Because at the end of the day, all those people are coming to the organization and spending their 8, 9, 10 hours at work doing business. So if you understand what they do and the way business runs, you will be able to find far better solutions for your own people and do better and greater service to them. So thanks, fantastic points. Moving to you, Ravish, and here's my next question. Can you share some specific initiatives in your organization in building an agile workforce, and how are you dealing with these VUCA challenges?
So, Rohan, to create a agile, resilient culture in the organization, it's a mindset change which has to be brought in for a large set of people. What we have realized is to bring in a mindset change, you have to work on the behaviors. So, if behaviors are exhibited repeatedly, they will lead into the culture that we are looking at. And to get people to behave the way we want them to behave, we need some processes which will get people to exhibit those behaviors. So the kind of the change starts from the process, then it leads to change in behavior, and when behaviors are repeated, it leads to the culture. So one example, if I have to take where we tried to bring in agility, was about talent mobility. So we feel if people spend a lot of time in the same role, then they create a kingdom around it. The risk appetite is limited. They know what is to be done. They're in their comfort zone, and the entire culture of agility gets impacted. So around 2 years back, our mobility numbers were just 9%. So 9% of employees were getting moved every year. Today, it's around 26, 27%. 37% of our roles are getting filled through IJP. So what we did was we created a lot of processes around it. We started with a strong talent management process where we started with segmenting our talent into different categories, like who are our shining stars, who are our hidden talents, stuck talent. Once we had defined the segments for the talent, then we started working on what to do with that. So if you have a shining star, what do you do with that? If you have a hidden talent, what do you do with it? And then there were quarterly reviews to monitor those actions. uh, we also had frameworks where people could move, like job enlargements, job swaps, internal job postings. So through these processes, we saw a change in behavior of the people leaders, people managers, employees becoming more um, uh, focused towards mobility. And through these kind of process change, which led to behavior, and now which has become a culture, we have seen that in our experience, what we have seen is there are three segments of people in an organization. One set of people who are uh, already ready for the future set of challenge. So these are the people you should identify and give them roles which are larger, futuristic, and so that you are able to retain them and take the best out of these talents. The second set of talent, which is not ready now, but has the attitude and the skills which can be groomed to be future ready. So the approach we adopt is 3E. We then try to provide them experience, exposure, and education so that they can kind of fill the gap there. And the third set of people are those who are not ready now, and maybe because of the skill set or the attitude, may not be ready for the future also. What we try to do is we try to work with them, try to get them to the category number two. But at some point, if the way the world is moving, at some point these set of employees may find it difficult to continue in the employment market. So that's my take on how do kind of we manage the culture of agility in the organization.
Great, great, Ravish. So thanks for sharing some practice around what are you doing at Syngenta. And I think two key things that I picked from here. The first, you spoke about behaviors, and it's the behaviors in the organization that really shapes up the culture, good or bad, right? And I'm reminded of a famous saying by Peter Drucker, which says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast," right? And what it tells us is that while all organizations who are into business, who are into making profits, they focus on strategy, many a times the culture aspect is completely ignored. And that results into lower productivity, lower engagements, higher attrition, eventually impacting your bottom line or your top line in the organization. But because culture is a very, very intangible kind of a resource and difficult to measure, people think let's focus our energy on strategy, which is all measurable, all tangible. But you made a very beautiful point here that behaviors are very, very important, because at the end of the day, that is what is going to drive performance. And I think you also spoke about the way you identify talent and the way you basket talent. And that reminds me of another beautiful quote which says, what gets monitored is what gets measured. So, it's important that if you have to measure the success or continuously monitor the progress on your people initiatives, and so glad to hear what you guys at Syngenta are doing. Fantastic. So let me now move to my next question, and this is to you, Sharmishta. We are witnessing furloughs and layoffs quite a bit these days. How do you think HR can minimize the impact or can really address this?
See, I think so. Layoffs, like I was just talking to a friend today, and he mentioned that this not in India, but in the US, sister-in-law who worked for a large organization, who we all know, always say that I'm not going to be doing layoffs, calls a group of people in HR itself and saying the jobs are now moving out of this country and moving somewhere else, so you don't have a job anymore. And for people, who are really high performing, have given 15 years to the organization, great ratings, but even then, right, because it's a cost arbitrage or whatever, and move to more developing countries like ours. And this was from US to India. So, layoffs are, I feel it depends on the consciousness of the leader at the top, which is the CEO of the organization. And if you have a thinking there that layoffs is the way to take it forward, as an HR, I've seen as HR leader, if you're on the right side of the CEO and the CEO is also counseling you and talking to you, then, and if you're already listening to the HR people, then whatever comment that you make is already being influenced in the back end, right? So, but if the back end influence has no, so there are two scenarios. Like as an HR, you're being able to influence the CEO. As an HR, you are not being able to influence the CEO. But whatever the CEO finally says is that going to happen? So I think we have to constantly look at the consciousness of the CEO. Coming to role of HR, how well then you influence the CEO, like we are all saying, with data, with insights, with wisdom, the points that you also made, Rohan, with experiences, they do these work, they not work. I think that's the important role that HR can play. And I've seen some HR leaders do it exceptionally well and some cannot. So it is the kind of trust that you have built with the CEO will allow HR to be able to influence that. But once the CEO has made up his or her mind, it is rather difficult to change it. And if the CEO comes to you for advice, ideally he or she should, before they make this kind of decisions, you are in the game. And if they're not coming to you, you are not being able to influence it at all. So I think to answer that question, is HR's role just to operationalize things or get things done today? And if your efficiency comes from there, then you have a certain ability to influence this kind of very big decisions. Then you are mostly the executor of the decision. But if HR, so there the personality or the characteristic of the individual HR leader plays a very big role. Are you looked at someone who is wise also, along with your ability to get things done? Are you looked at someone who is balanced in the way you think and take decisions? Then your counsel would be of importance, and then you'll be able to influence. Otherwise, you would just end up executing and maybe at best bomb it a little bit. So it's not easy always, right? Uh,
Yeah,
but yeah, you have to just match the consciousness levels of these two people, and that's a role HR can kind of play.
fantastic, fantastic. No, I think you made a very beautiful point out here that it's it's the role of HR and how we really influence the senior leadership, the CEO, the people who are making these decisions. But there's something that came to my mind as you were talking, Sharmisha, and I want your view on this. Sometimes these layoffs are just not an option. If you want to continue running your business, sometimes you have to make those hard decisions. It's never easy letting go people, but in the interest of the larger organization, sometimes you have to take those decisions. But it's not about just doing a layoff, it's about how you handle that process, right? And I remember some time back, this was during COVID, and uh, a CEO of a fairly large organization, he decided to go on a Zoom call and fire a few hundred people, saying that today's your last day. Now, while layoffs sometimes can be very compelling and maybe you don't have an option, you definitely have an option to be looking at this whole process with a more humane perspective. And I want to know your thoughts on this.
Can I share my honest view and what I've observed over the last, try and keep it as practical as possible? I may
Please
be
go
wrong,
ahead.
but I'm just sharing my honest observations. And this has always been my personal belief, when I would say HR is doing, even for workmen, right? There's huge negotiations and some few paisa we are saving, and we're like, reveling on that. कितना मिल रहा है, like they're getting 12,000 rupees a month those days. It's becoming like 13,500, 3 year settlement, and everyone. So, even then I used to feel that, if you add up all that you're paying to this X number of workmen and the increase that you're talking about, and look at your overall compensation cost, this is almost nothing. So what are we really struggling and fighting and feeling so good about ourselves on, right? And creating more and more stress. In one of my earlier companies that I worked, Mahindra's, I don't know how many of you are aware. So Anand very smartly said that all these, long-term negotiations, etc., will happen through the manufacturing leaders. HR will have no role to play in it. And we never had since then any strikes, anything, because the reality is there. You decide, and whatever comes up, because they're your people, right? And then you're taking care of your teams, like you do for compensation of your people. We also always want them to pay the most. So I think some of these very real kind of decisions are very important also to be taken. So many a times. I feel we kind of, so to answer your question, that how do you handle then, these layoffs? My point is just an extension of the point that I made, is many a times, I've seen, also observed another thing. Organizations who just randomly start hiring just because they're doing well, right? And people are sort of sidestepping HR, reaching out to CEOs or whatever business leaders and getting their mandate, getting those sign-offs done. And you are watching and you're wondering, what are you doing? And if you go back and talk to the people in the same business 3-4 layers down the line, they would say, yeah, I agree with you. I didn't even need 18,000 people. I needed 5,000, but better quality, right? And with 18,000, there's attrition. Now you've increased the number to 26, because some few leaders at the top, they believe that I have to now play a volume game because I have to meet my numbers. You have your influence, you get it signed off, and we are watching. Now, this is also a part of the organizational culture. So I have seen where you have done some random stuff like this, right? Any industry you take up. Today you are looking at layoffs. I've always felt, why are you hiring so randomly? You go to campus, you're hiring in hordes. What are you going to do with them, right? So if you take decisions at the source, as we say, which is not thought through, which is not discussed, you will someday have to cut down your risks or whatever your costs. So one is, I would urge, when you see some behaviors, I think Ravish also talked about it in the organization, which is out of the whack, that business leaders going and taking these calls, bypassing HR, not really giving solid cases as to why not using those data and insights. You mark my words, after some time you have to correct it, right? So I think Rohan has just dropped off. So I think be proactive so that you avoid, at least have the right behaviors in place, so that you are not forced to do this kind of things, layoffs and all later. Now, yes, you may have done all the right things, you may have taken all the right steps. Still, you may be required to do some kind of layoffs because something has happened which is unprecedented, and you can't afford to spend that kind of cost. I was just moving into a stage that if your behaviors have always been right, you have done all the right things that you're meant to do. My chances, it's very difficult to get to that spot, but you could, because of some unprecedented, unforeseen, unplanned circumstances. You may still have to lay off. Then, you are, then you of course have to manage the placement well, talk to people well, because we're dealing with human beings. You definitely can't do those stuff. Come onto a call, get into a Zoom call, get into a phone call, and do those kind of random things. And I must tell you, to support my point, this organization, which I heard the story today, this got done. I'm always watching this organization and saying, why are they hiring so many people randomly? What are they doing with them? Because you have worked with them and you see the kind of quality they deliver. Why? And of course, I'm not surprised that they have to go for layoff. Anyways, so, but if you have to do it, you have to do it with a lot of humanness, like you talked about. There has to be a plan. I know there are organizations who can be leveraged. We are not all experts. Don't try to do them. Get the experts in, who are experts in this space. Work with them. Get your people trained at least by the experts. If it's a large scale layoff that you have to do, who knows how to handle these things. Please don't try to use your own intelligence, especially if you have not done it before, or even in your HR group, you have someone who's already done it in the past. These are not things we can do trials and errors with. It can lead to suicides. It can lead to all kinds of things. So you have to be very careful. If you don't have the expertise, this is one area. You at least spend money in getting the expertise in, rather than trying to create a process. I'd engage them, learn from them, but please don't try to do something kind of random. But if you don't listen to all of this, then it's okay.
No, well said. I think you made a very brilliant point here that, when the business is doing great, when you're growing at a 20-25% CAGR, everything is, the performance is absolutely
I think Rohan has dropped.
Yeah, Rohan's network is.
Yeah. And Sharmishta, to the point that you were talking about in terms of layoff, no, and for businesses, they kind of specific decisions and expertise that they should be consulting and working with. They just bypass them and do it. So there's a perfect example to it. So there was a trend, and it was the year 2022, which we have seen, wherein people, when I say that the demand was really the supply was really low and the demand was high. So that point in time, I remember when we were hiring, the hiring numbers were really high. The reason was, again, attrition was high because everyone was sitting with 2, 3, 5 offers in hands. And look at the crazy money that companies were throwing out. There were no, literally, the parities were really off. There was no use even of having a parity. That's the kind of crazy money was flowing in the market, and people were getting all of such kind of offers and all. And that point in time, I think I was speaking in one of the forums, and I told them, this is a bubble and it's going to burst. There is a time when it's going to happen, when you will want to have that normalization done, because a person sitting with some years of experience, there is a reason why there is a benchmarking done, there is a reason why there is a comp range to every skill, and those things have been done. But today, if you damage that and you are not even maintaining it, sometime or the other that normalization will come. And as a business, you cannot afford to work above the margins that you have. And I think it's this year of 2023. It's not just economy which has contributed to the layoffs and everything that's happening today. It's also that bubble that was created in 2022. And I think we were all in the HR fraternity that used to be a talk. This is a bubble, it's going to burst, and it's going to burst soon. And that happened. I mean, 2023, we are seeing all of these things happening. If you are an X amount of years of experience
Yeah.
getting Z amount of money, you have to have some normalization. And who's bearing that cost? It's the people, right? Well, the companies were throwing that money, it was happening from that side because of the demand and whatever. You just went ahead in the market, hired people with whatever numbers and money and everything, and today you have to normalize it and you're taking actions.
True.
Great. So thanks Nidhi for adding on to it. Completely agree with your views. And here I'm now going to pose one last question, and this is a common question for all the three panelists, and I want all of you to talk about it in the order. We'll first go with Nidhi, then Ravish, and then finally Sharmishta. So this question to you is a common question, and you know, whenever I mentor students or talk to students, I always tell them that this is the best time. This is a golden time for the HR field. Best time for HR as a field if you've chosen. And what is that one piece of advice that you would like to give to the young HR professionals who have just got into the industry or are currently students and will get into the industry next year, as to how do they shape themselves up, how do they be effective HR guys, and they're able to tackle these VUCA challenges effectively. So, your views, please.
Sure. Rohan, I think you have the question that you have asked is very close to my heart, because I love dealing with this generation of people who just come out of campuses and talking to them, and counseling them, telling them that how they can really shape up their future. And for the HR people and the students who are studying HR and they want to get into HR, or just coming in and joining in the industry, joining in the fraternity, the first thing that I would want to tell them is, don't just go by books, go also by the practical world that's there outside, go by scenarios that happen, go by, talk to people, talk to professionals, have mentors for yourself, have mentors from the industry for yourself, understand the practical scenarios, and then understand what is it best that you can do, right? Another is, I think, for the young HR professionals, I have seen, into within my network as well, on my LinkedIn and all of that, I keep getting messages, I'm doing this, can I get an internship? And I'm looking out for an internship. Don't look out for an internship. Pick and choose for your internship. Pick and choose for what industry interests you the most. What is it that you want to do? What is that function of HR that you will be really interested in? Pick and choose. And don't, at the same time, don't be really choosy in terms of, I will do only this part of thing. No, you need to be first a gamut of HR, and then, pick and choose for yourself to become an expert into one. But then try and understand the entire employee life cycle, how people work, how businesses work, and then get into it. So I think practical experiences from the industry is what is the most important factor, for the young ones coming into the fraternity.
Well said. So, I think the whole emphasis here is that just don't be a kitabi kida. While theories are important, understanding the academia is important, but it's also important that you talk to industry experts outside. You have mentors who can guide you, who can help you, and who can help you shape your careers. Great piece of advice, Nidhi. Ravish, over to you.
So, Rohan, first of all, I would want to say that this is the best time to be in India. We are hitting $4 trillion economy. It's said that in next 5 years it may double. So the kind of amount of money which was created in last 75 years post independence, maybe more amount of money will be created in next 5 years. If we look at 20 years, then maybe we'll be a $25 trillion economy, even if we grow at a 10% nominal growth rate. So there is immense amount of opportunities which will be there. Our population, which was a disadvantage for us in the past, is one of the bigger advantages for us. We are 1.4 billion people. Every sixth citizen in the world is an Indian. We are 20. Average age is 28. We are English speaking, hardworking. We can be the employees for the world. Many countries in the world are aging. If world has to grow, India will contribute big time. You will see a lot of Indians in important positions in business, politics, sports, uh, doctors, lawyers. So, in nutshell, what I'm trying to say is, for the students who will be passing out, there is immense opportunities. With the opportunities,
Yes.
I would also want to highlight is there are risks, because this pie will not get distributed equally. Some will have larger pies and some people will have challenges. In the past, Nidhi Sharmishta spoke about how the VUCA world technology is changing. So there will be those kinds of threats. So to get prepared for that, my advice to the students would be, first look at your career more like a marathon than a sprint. Don't think about short-term decisions. Think, if you have to work for 25, 30 years, how do you want to directionally plan your career? That's number one. Number two is, because the pace of change is so fast, keep upskilling yourself. Otherwise, the skill set you have may become obsolete and you may become unemployable. Looking at your marathon 25, 30 years, what skills you require, keep upskilling on that. And third and most important thing is, focus on your well-being. Post COVID, we have seen a trend where well-being issues, be it emotional well-being, physical well-being, financial well-being, um, have become a big challenge. They can be a sudden disruptor to your life or your career. Focus, invest a lot of time on yourself, in all aspects of wellness. So those would be my points, Rohan.
Fantastic, Ravish. I think well said. Uh, Remember that you are running a marathon and not a sprint. I think that really sums it all. Very important piece of advice for the younger generation of that is getting into HR. And you made a very important point about upskilling, because yes, I completely agree that the world is changing at a pace that this world has never seen, and this calls for a lot of agility as professionals. And the only way you can be relevant is by ensuring that you continuously learn. So learning today or upskilling today is not really an option. It's like, survival of the fittest, uh, with the kind of and the pace at which the things are changing. And I think that's the most
We'll wait for Rohan to. Yeah, it's coming back.
Sven, that was a fantastic point. Sharmishta, over to you.
I think between Nidhi and Ravish, I thought all the points have really been very beautifully captured. The only, and I was thinking, is there really a need to add? Then just one point that I feel might just be relevant, which is, like you said, VUCA world is also reshaping and reforming itself to a bunny world, as we call it, which is brittle and anxious and non-linear and incomprehensible. And if the young HR professionals have to operate in a world like this and become people's person first, and also, someone who understands business and supports business. I think it would be very important for them to understand how to find their voice of influence. And influence, by definition, is being able to create win-win. In and the current generation, at times there is fear, or at times there is anger related to frustration because we are not being able to figure out how to share our point of view, and we just let things be. So the younger generation, I think, come from a much more secured space themselves. So maybe they'll not let the fear reign supreme, like we see in sports and other things also, how Indian teams have started performing. They would also not let their frustration simmer and something becoming anger. In either of these two spectrums, you just can't influence. I wish they learn, find their voice, come from a very important place of security, and are being able to create win-win between really the broker, between the business of the broker between the institution, business, and individuals themselves. So and individuals of the organization, people as we call it. So I really
Yeah.
wish that they find that voice of influence and make a real
Well said.
difference.
Well said. Well said. I think uh, influencing skill could be the greatest armor that you could possess today, and not only as HR professionals but any professional. And in fact, uh, that also sort of reminds me. And when I was having a mentoring conversation with a young student, and we were talking about this as to how does one learn and what does one really focus on. My only single piece of advice to that gentleman was try and learn skills which technology cannot easily replace. Because
Nice.
at some point of time, artificial intelligence is going to take over. And I was talking to somebody, and he was mentioning to me that even now AI is writing a script for a film. So we always felt that writing a script is the most creative job. Now imagine an artificial intelligence writing a script for a film. I mean, at some point of time, technology is going to catch up and get you there, but keep on learning and especially focus on areas which are difficult to be replaced by technology, and where you continue to add value, because anything that you cannot add value to, either you will lose your job, it will get outsourced, or somebody better will take over. So to stay
Yeah.
relevant, it's important that you keep on adding value. And to keep on adding value, you keep on focusing on skills which are difficult to be replaced. So great. Thank you to all three of you.
And
Uh,
if I may
uh,
add, Rohan, if I may add,
yes,
Rohan,
please.
just on your point, along with skills, you started by saying insights, wisdom, and experience. So, insights, your AI can give you, but wisdom and experience, it can't. So, maybe it's a combination of skills, experience, and wisdom.
Sure. Sure. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So thanks. I think I had fun moderating this session, and I'm taking a lot of golden nuggets back home. It was a brilliant session, and so glad, and it was so thoughtful of Shared Pro to put three very senior HR leaders coming from very different backgrounds. One from banking, another from IT, third from another global organization, Syngenta. I think great to have all of you together here, and thanks for sharing these golden nuggets with the audience. And over to you, Priyanka.
Thank you, Rohan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
Nidhi, Sharmishta, Ravish, for sharing such valuable insights. And a special thanks to our moderator, Rohan sir, for moderating the session in such a wonderful way. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks a
Thanks,
Thank you,
lot.
everyone.
Thank
Samantha.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Rohan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharmishta. Thank
Thank
you.
you.